told her to sit at the back. He said the table was for real family. He believed the night belonged to him. What he didn't know was that the woman he publicly dismissed owned the room. At a glamorous Chicago gala, a quiet wife is pushed aside, underestimated and humiliated until one announcement shatters every illusion. Power shifts, truth takes the stage, and a man is forced to face the consequences of his arrogance in front of everyone who once applauded him. This is a story about silent strength, hidden empires, and the moment when the person you ignored stands up and changes everything. Emily Parker stood in front of the bedroom mirror, fastening the delicate clasp of her necklace with slow, deliberate fingers. The reflection staring back at her was calm, composed, almost unreadable. There was no nervous excitement in her eyes, no anxious anticipation, only quiet awareness. Behind her, Ryan Parker adjusted his tie for the third time, his expression bright with self-satisfaction. He grinned at his reflection like a man already congratulating himself on a victory not yet earned. "You know," he said casually, smoothing the front of his charcoal suit, "it's not every day our family gets invited to something like this." Emily met his eyes through the mirror. "Is that so?" Ryan laughed softly. "Of course it is. North Crown Solutions doesn't just host events. They host statements. This is Chicago's elite crowd tonight. CEOs, investors, board members." He straightened his shoulders. "My brother must have really impressed them." Emily reached for her clutch and closed it gently. "You think your brother arranged all this?" Ryan turned, confident. "Who else? Mark's been networking nonstop. He knows how these things work. Connections, leverage, timing." He winked. "Family name still carries weight." Emily nodded, her lips curving slightly. "Family name," she repeated. Ryan checked his watch. "Just try not to overdo it tonight, okay?" She raised an eyebrow. "Overdo what?" "The whole formal thing," he said quickly, waving a hand. "This isn't a charity dinner or one of those social mixers you like. It's business. Heavy business. A lot of serious talk." "I see." Ryan hesitated, then added, "Honestly, it's mostly for the guys. You know how it is. The wives usually sit together, chat, drink wine. Nothing wrong with that." Emily turned fully toward him now. "And where exactly will you be sitting?" Ryan smiled, already distracted. "Main table. Front section. Board guests, family representatives. That sort of thing." "And me?" He shrugged lightly. "Wherever they seat the spouses. It's not personal, Em. It's just the structure." Structure. Emily let the words settle between them. Ryan leaned in and kissed her cheek, quick and distracted. "You'll be fine. Just enjoy yourself." He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, humming under his breath. The door clicked shut. Emily exhaled slowly. The room fell quiet, but not empty. On the dresser beside her lay a slim, black envelope embossed with a silver emblem, a stylized crown split by clean, geometric lines. North Crown Solutions, her company's insignia. She picked it up, turning it once in her hands. Inside was a card, elegant and simple. Founder and CEO, Emily Parker. She slipped it back into the envelope and placed it inside her clutch. 6 years. 6 years of early mornings and late nights. Of spreadsheets reviewed in silence. Of negotiations conducted under holding companies and shell names. Of decisions made without applause. Ryan had never known. Not because she hid maliciously, but because he never asked. When she first mentioned consulting, he laughed. When she talked about scaling, he called it a hobby. When she said she wanted to build something substantial, he told her to slow down and enjoy life. So she did both. She enjoyed life, and she built an empire quietly beside it. North Crown Solutions didn't exist on paper the way people imagined. It was the result of strategic acquisitions, rescues of failing firms, and one brutal turnaround that had changed everything. Event planning was just the surface. Logistics, brand positioning, crisis management. She built companies the way some people built reputations, carefully, invisibly, effectively. And tonight was one of her largest client galas, for the Parker family. She smiled faintly. "Not my place at the table," she murmured. The city glowed as they drove downtown. lights reflecting off glass towers like scattered constellations. Ryan talked the entire way. "And if this goes well, Dad might finally take me seriously," he said, gripping the steering wheel. "Mark says there could be opportunities, real ones." Emily listened, nodding at the right moments. She watched the skyline instead. Every building reminded her of something she'd built, or could build. She knew which firms occupied which floors, which CEOs were struggling quietly, which partnerships were brittle beneath polished press releases. Ryan parked near the venue, stepping out with visible pride. The building stood luminous against the night, a modern structure of glass and steel, understated yet undeniably expensive. Valets moved with quiet efficiency. Guests arrived in tailored suits and evening gowns, laughter subdued but confident. Ryan straightened his jacket. "This is it." Emily stepped out beside him. She wore a deep blue gown, elegant, unassuming, precise. It didn't scream for attention. It didn't need to. At the entrance, a hostess smiled professionally. "Good evening. Welcome to North Crown Solutions Annual Client Gala." Ryan lifted his chin. "Ryan Parker, Parker Industries." The hostess checked her tablet. "Yes, Mr. Parker. And Mrs. Parker." Her eyes flickered to Emily, just for a fraction of a second. Then she stepped aside. "Please enjoy your evening." Ryan didn't notice. Inside, the ballroom unfolded in quiet grandeur. Chandeliers glowed like frozen light, tables dressed in ivory and gold. Music drifted through the air, soft and deliberate. Ryan exhaled appreciatively. "Now this is class," Emily agreed silently. A server approached with champagne. Ryan accepted immediately. "You can bring one for her, too," he added without looking. Emily thanked the server politely. She noticed the way staff glanced at her. Not lingering, not obvious. Just checking in. Respectful, controlled. She had instructed them that morning, no titles, no acknowledgments, not unless I speak first. Tonight she wanted honesty. The Parker family gathered near the main tables, loud and confident. Ryan's father laughed heartily. His brother Mark spoke animatedly about partnerships and projections. "This table is perfect," Ryan said proudly as a staff member guided them forward. Then he turned to Emily. "You can sit back there," he said, pointing toward a table near the edge of the room, "with the other wives." Emily met his eyes. "Back there?" Ryan nodded impatiently. "It's arranged that way. Don't make a thing of it." She smiled gently. "Of course." He didn't wait for her response. Emily stood still for a moment, champagne glass steady in her hand. Around her the night sparkled. Laughter, music, success. She walked calmly toward the table he indicated. A junior staff member nearly spoke as she passed. Training kicking in, then caught Emily's eye. Emily gave the smallest shake of her head. The staff member nodded and stepped aside. Emily took her seat at the back. From there, she could see everything. The main table. Ryan leaning forward, laughing too loudly. His family basking in assumed importance. She took a slow sip of champagne. The night had only just begun, and not one of them realized they were sitting inside her world. From her seat near the edge of the ballroom, Emily Parker had a perfect view of the room. Not the way a guest saw it, dazzled by chandeliers and music, but the way an architect sees a structure. She noticed timing, flow, where conversations clustered, where staff paused too long, where a waiter adjusted his route after a subtle glance from the operations desk. Everything was working exactly as designed. At the main table, Ryan was in his element. He leaned back in his chair, jacket unbuttoned, champagne glass raised slightly higher than necessary. His laughter carried farther than anyone else's, the confident sound of a man convinced the night was confirming his importance. "I'm telling you," Ryan said to a gray-haired executive beside him, "North Crown has changed the game. You don't get this level of polish without serious pull." The man nodded politely. "Impressive execution." Ryan smiled. "Connections matter." Emily watched as a server approached the main table. Careful, respectful. He placed a dish in front of Ryan's father, then Ryan, then moved on. Ryan barely acknowledged him. At Emily's table, the atmosphere was different. The women seated nearby chatted softly about schools, vacations, and renovations. One of them leaned toward Emily with a pleasant smile. Are you family? The woman asked. My husband is, Emily replied. Oh, the woman said, glancing toward the front. You're brave, sitting all the way back here alone. Emily smiled politely. I like to see the whole room. The woman laughed lightly, then turned back to her conversation. A server approached Emily's table, pausing just slightly longer than protocol required. Good evening, he said. May I refresh your drink? Emily shook her head. Just water, please. He nodded immediately and returned within seconds. Faster than necessary, precise. He set the glass down gently, meeting her eyes only long enough to confirm approval. From across the room, Ryan noticed. He frowned. The server had taken too long. Ryan leaned back in his chair, irritation flickering across his face. He raised his voice just enough. Hey, he called out, tone sharp but masked with a smile. We've been waiting over here. The server froze, glanced between tables, then apologized quickly and moved toward the main table. Emily didn't react. She simply took a sip of water, but the shift didn't go unnoticed. A woman seated near the front leaned toward her companion. Did you see how that waiter looked at her? Her companion nodded slowly, like she was the one in charge. At the operations desk across the ballroom, the head of operations, Daniel Reyes, watched quietly. He adjusted his earpiece, eyes flicking briefly toward Emily. She didn't look at him. That was the signal. The orchestra began a soft transition, exactly on cue. Ryan continued talking, oblivious to the undercurrent forming beneath the evening. You know, he said, gesturing broadly, people think these companies just appear out of nowhere, but it's always someone pulling strings behind the scenes. One of the guests smiled thinly. Interesting way to put it, Ryan laughed. That's business. Emily's mind drifted briefly, not to the room but to years earlier. To the first time Ryan laughed when she mentioned consulting, to the dinner where he introduced her as keeping busy, to the countless moments where her silence was mistaken for absence. She had learned then, some people only understand power when it speaks loudly. Tonight, she was letting it whisper. A tall man in a tailored navy suit entered the ballroom late. His presence was subtle but commanding. Several guests straightened instinctively. Marcus Hale, one of North Crown's senior partners. He scanned the room once, not searching for the main table, not looking for applause, but for Emily. When he found her at the back, his posture changed. Not dramatically, just enough. He started toward her. Emily felt it before she saw him. She turned her head slightly. Their eyes met. She gave a barely perceptible shake of her head. Marcus stopped instantly. He adjusted his jacket, nodded to another guest nearby, and redirected himself toward the bar. But the moment had been seen. Mark Parker leaned toward Ryan, voice lowered. Isn't that Marcus Hale? Ryan squinted. Who? North Crown partner. Big one. Ryan shrugged. Probably here because of us. Mark hesitated. He was looking at your wife. Ryan laughed. Emily? He doesn't even know her. Mark frowned but didn't push. At Emily's table, the woman beside her leaned in again. You know him. Emily smiled faintly. In passing. The dinner service continued. Courses arrived and disappeared with seamless precision. Timing perfect. Music subtle. Ryan's confidence grew with every glass. So what does your wife do? A guest asked him casually. Ryan chuckled. Oh, Emily, she dabbles, helps with projects, keeps busy. Emily heard it. She didn't flinch. The guest nodded politely. Must be nice. Ryan leaned in. Business like this? He gestured around the room. That's not really her world. A ripple of polite laughter followed. Emily felt it then. Not anger, not embarrassment, but clarity. This was exactly who he was when he believed no one could challenge him. She watched as Ryan leaned back again, satisfied with himself. Then the lights dimmed slightly. The MC stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced warmly, we hope you're enjoying your evening. Before dinner concludes, we have a few special acknowledgments planned. Ryan straightened immediately. This is it, he whispered to Mark. They'll probably mention us. Emily folded her hands neatly in her lap. The MC continued, later tonight, we'll be joined by a very special guest, the founder and CEO of North Crown Solutions. A murmur swept through the room. Ryan smiled broadly. Told you. Emily's lips curved slightly. The orchestra resumed softly. Across the ballroom, Daniel Reyes tapped his earpiece once, eyes on Emily. She nodded almost imperceptibly. Not yet. The room buzzed with anticipation, curiosity building like pressure beneath polished conversation. Emily remained seated at the back of the room, calm, composed, unseen by those who believed she belonged there. But the balance had already shifted, and the room was starting to feel it. The anticipation in the ballroom had changed texture. It was no longer casual curiosity. It had sharpened into expectation. Glasses were lifted more slowly now. Conversations thinned, voices lowering as people glanced toward the stage, then toward the VIP section, searching for movement. Everyone was trying to guess who would stand when the moment arrived. At the main table, Ryan Parker sat taller than before, confidence settling over him like a tailored coat. He leaned toward his father and brother, lowering his voice but not his pride. "Watch," he said quietly. "This is where connections pay off." Mark nodded, though something in his expression had tightened. His eyes flicked once more toward the back of the room, where Emily still sat, calm and still, hands folded loosely in her lap. She hadn't moved in nearly 20 minutes. That alone was strange. People who didn't belong in rooms like this usually tried too hard. They checked their phones, shifted in their chairs, scanned the exits. Emily did none of that. She sat as though the room were an extension of herself. At the operations desk, Daniel Reyes checked his watch. Everything was aligned. He glanced across the ballroom one last time. Emily met his eyes. This time she nodded. The orchestra faded, the final note stretching into silence. The MC stepped back onto the stage, smiling broadly as the room stilled. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice warm and measured, "thank you for being part of such a remarkable evening." Polite applause followed. This event represents not just celebration, but partnership, resilience, and vision. "Hakuri," Ryan smiled, already certain he knew where this was going. "Tonight," the MC continued, "we've spoken about excellence, about leadership, about what it takes to build something that lasts." A pause, Ryan leaned forward. "And now," the MC said, "it's time to welcome the person responsible for bringing that vision to life." The lights dimmed slightly. Every head turned toward the VIP section. Nothing happened. A flicker of confusion passed through the room. Then from the back row, a chair moved. The sound was quiet, but it carried. Emily Parker stood. The shift was immediate. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. A few people inhaled sharply. Others leaned forward, brows furrowing as their brains struggled to catch up with what their eyes were seeing. Emily stepped into the aisle. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step steady, unhurried. She didn't rush. She didn't look around to measure reactions. She walked as though the path had always been hers. Ryan's smile faltered. "What is she doing?" his father muttered. Ryan didn't answer. His throat had tightened too suddenly. Emily passed table after table, faces turning as she moved. Staff members straightened instinctively. A manager pressed a hand to his earpiece, then relaxed when he saw her expression. She reached the stage. The MC turned toward her, his professional smile deepening into something closer to respect. He stepped back, extending the microphone with both hands. "Please welcome," he said clearly, "the founder and CEO of North Crown Solutions, Mrs. Emily Parker." The room froze. Then it broke. Gasps rippled outward. Chairs scraped softly as people shifted to see better. A few voices whispered her name like a question. At the main table, Ryan's champagne glass slipped from his fingers. It shattered against the floor. No one laughed. Mark's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. His father's face drained of color, eyes locked on the stage. Ryan didn't move. He couldn't. Emily took the microphone. She waited. She didn't speak until the noise settled, until the shock gave way to silence, until the room leaned toward her without realizing it. "Good evening," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried. "It's been a pleasure watching tonight unfold," Emily continued. "Every detail, every interaction, every moment of connection." She smiled gently. "That's why I built North Crown Solutions." A murmur moved through the crowd, admiration replacing confusion. I wanted to create spaces where excellence doesn't need to announce itself, she said, where preparation speaks louder than ego, where people feel supported without needing to know who's standing behind the curtain. Her gaze swept the room slowly. Then it paused, and just briefly, at the main table. Ryan felt it like a weight on his chest. For a long time, Emily said, I worked quietly, not because I lacked confidence, but because I learned early that silence can be a strategy. A few people nodded. People often mistake quiet for smallness, she continued calmly. They assume that if someone isn't demanding attention, they must not have earned it. She shifted her grip on the microphone, relaxed. But growth doesn't always sit at the front table. The words landed softly and cut deeply. Sometimes, Emily said, it waits, it listens, it builds. Ryan swallowed hard. I started this company with a single client, she went on, a borrowed office, a problem no one else wanted to solve. And I learned something valuable. She paused. You don't need permission to build something meaningful. The room was utterly silent now. You just need discipline, vision, and the patience to let people reveal who they are when they think no one's watching. At the main table, Mark slowly turned his head toward Ryan. Ryan didn't see him. He was staring at the woman on the stage, the woman he thought he knew, realizing how thoroughly he had misunderstood her. This evening isn't about surprise, Emily said gently. It's not about embarrassment. Ryan flinched. It's about honesty. She smiled again, softer now. I'm grateful to every client here, every partner, every team member who made tonight possible. Applause began, tentative at first, then stronger. And I'm grateful for family, Emily added, because family has a way of teaching us who we truly are. The applause swelled. Some guests stood, others raised their glasses. Emily nodded once in acknowledgement and stepped back from the podium. The room erupted. Ryan stayed seated. The sound washed over him like water over stone, and for the first time in years, his certainty cracked completely. He watched as people turned toward Emily, watched respect gather around her effortlessly, watched power rearrange the room without force. He understood then. He hadn't just underestimated his wife. He had built his identity on the belief that she would never rise high enough to challenge him. And now she stood above him. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in truth. The applause continued, and Ryan Parker sat frozen at the table where he had finally learned what it meant to be small. The applause did not end all at once. It ebbed in waves, first thunderous, then steady, then dissolving into a hum of conversation that filled the ballroom with a new kind of electricity. People rose from their seats, turning toward the stage, toward Emily, toward the truth that had just rearranged the evening. Ryan Parker remained seated. Around him, chairs scraped back. Glasses clinked. Voices overlapped in admiration and disbelief. Did you know? No one knew. That explains everything. She built all of this? Ryan heard every word as if through water. His father stood abruptly, his chair tipping slightly before Mark caught it. Mark's face was tight, unreadable. The family that had walked in convinced of their importance now looked like spectators at someone else's triumph. Emily stepped down from the stage with unhurried grace. She did not rush into the crowd or accept immediate praise. She paused at the foot of the steps, exchanging a brief word with the MC, then moved back into the ballroom, and the room followed her. Executives shifted paths. Investors turned their bodies. Conversations redirected mid-sentence as people recalibrated where attention belonged. The power was subtle, but unmistakable like gravity, changing direction. Ryan watched it happen. He watched respect gather around her the way it never had around him. He watched men who barely acknowledged him earlier now angle their shoulders toward her, waiting for a moment to speak. Women who had dismissed her now studied her with new eyes. He felt his father's stare, heavy, silent, disappointed. So, his father said quietly, not looking at him, this is what you didn't know. Ryan swallowed. Dad, I don't, his father cut in. Not here. Mark leaned closer, voice low and sharp. How long? Ryan shook his head. I didn't know. I swear. Mark's jaw clenched. You've been bragging about pulling strings all night. Ryan said nothing. Across the room, Emily spoke with calm warmth to a silver-haired woman, then to a man in a navy tuxedo. She listened more than she spoke. She asked precise questions. She thanked people without performing gratitude. She was exactly who she had always been. Only now, the room finally saw it. When she passed near the Parker table, her father-in-law cleared his throat and stood. "Emily." She stopped and turned politely. "Sir?" He nodded stiffly. "Congratulations. I had no idea." Emily met his gaze evenly. "Thank you." Mark stood as well, awkward and uncertain. "Emily, that was impressive." "Good evening, Mark," she replied calmly. Ryan stood last. His legs felt unsteady. "Emily," he said. She looked at him, not with anger, not with triumph, with distance. "Enjoy the rest of the evening," she said simply. Then she turned and walked away. That hurt more than any public confrontation could have, because it meant she wasn't punishing him. She was done shrinking. The balcony doors closed softly behind Emily. The city stretched beyond the glass Chicago skyline, alive with light and motion, indifferent to the drama unfolding inside. The air was cool, steady, grounding. Emily rested her hands lightly on the railing and breathed, not in relief, in clarity. Behind her, the gala continued. Music resumed, laughter returned, conversations reshaped themselves around a new understanding. But here on the balcony, there was quiet. Footsteps approached. She didn't turn immediately. "Emily," Ryan said softly. She waited a moment, then faced him. He stood a few feet away, hands at his sides, posture uncertain. Not the confident man from earlier, not the host in borrowed authority, just a man finally aware of his ignorance. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Emily held his gaze. "You never asked." Ryan frowned. "That's not—" "It is," she said gently. "When I spoke about work, you laughed. When I mentioned plans, you minimized them. When I stayed quiet, you assumed there was nothing to hear." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration giving way to shame. I didn't realize." "You didn't think I was capable," Emily said calmly. Ryan flinched. "That's not what I meant." "It's what you showed," she replied. He stepped closer. "Did you do this to humiliate me?" Emily shook her head. "No, I did this because I'm done hiding." She turned back toward the skyline. "If you felt humiliated, it's because the truth finally stood up." Ryan's voice cracked. "I feel like I've been standing next to you all these years and never saw you." "That," Emily said quietly, "is the problem." He nodded, eyes wet. "I'm sorry." She didn't rush to comfort him. She let the words sit where they belonged. "I don't need apologies right now," she said. "I need respect, consistency, truth." "I can do that," he said quickly. "I want to." Emily looked at him then, not coldly, not warmly, honestly. "If we rebuild," she said, "it will be on equal ground. I won't make myself smaller so you can feel tall." Ryan swallowed. "I understand." She nodded once. That was all. The weeks that followed did not bring instant peace. They brought recalibration. At family gatherings, people spoke more carefully around Emily, not because they feared her, but because they finally recognized her authority. Ryan listened more. He spoke less. When conversations turned to business, he redirected questions to her without resentment. "You should ask Emily," he said calmly. "She knows more about that." It wasn't performative, it was earned. One evening, Ryan found her at the dining table reviewing documents. "Can I sit?" he asked. She looked up, surprised, then nodded. He leaned in, studying the screen. "This expansion, it's smart. Diversifying venues reduces risk." Emily raised an eyebrow. "You followed that?" He nodded. "I'm learning." It wasn't a declaration. It was a beginning. At the next family dinner, something shifted quietly. Her father-in-law pulled out a chair at the main table. "For you," he said. Emily paused, then sat. No applause, no speeches, just correction. Later that night, as she removed her earrings, Ryan stood in the doorway. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For letting me see you." Emily studied him for a long moment. "I didn't do this to teach you," she said. "I did it so I could breathe." He nodded. "I see you now." She didn't promise forgiveness. She didn't need to. She turned off the light and went to bed, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Grounded, visible, finally seated where she belonged, not because someone invited her, but because she had built the table herself. Subscribe now for more powerful stories about respect, betrayal, and unforgettable twists. Your next story starts here.